Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 236, Xatu the Future. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking down a path toward Mahogany Town. As Team Rocket was aware that Ash and the gang would likely come down the path, so they had decided to build yet another pitfall trap, which they had just finished by the time they saw Ash and the gang walking towards them. So they quickly covered it up with some dirt, and they hid away in some bushes, waiting for Ash and the gang to fall in the camouflaged hole. Unfortunately for Team Rocket, Ash and the gang were instantly suspicious of the suspicious-looking dirt covering something on the road, as they recalled all of the previous times that Team Rocket had placed a hole on a seemingly peaceful road. With that, Ash decides to test the nearby ground and make sure that there was no pitfall traps, and he manages to kick an area, and although it doesn't reveal Team Rocket's trap, they start to get pissed because they get worried that Ash and the gang would discover their trap. Ash then tries another area, and he steps on the trap. However, nothing happens, much to Team Rocket's confusion, who were spying from the bushes. Thinking that Ash and the gang may have been up to something and doing something to interfere with their trap, Team Rocket simply order Ash and the gang to fall into the goddamn hole already. James foolishly decides to jump on the spot where the trap was, wanting to see if the trap would actually work. But of course, when it does this time, after a few of James's attempts, thereby causing the entire road to cave in. This means that Team Rocket go falling into the hole as well, not just Ash and the gang. However, Team Rocket were overjoyed at the fact that their trap actually worked, and they were fully prepared, so they landed on their feet. Although they had landed before Ash and the gang, so this meant that Ash and the gang landed on them, knocking them down. And then, to make matters worse, Jesse's Wobbuffet then forcibly popped out of its Pokeball, and the added weight caused the ground to cave in even further, sending Ash and the gang and Team Rocket plummeting down through the hole into an entirely different area that was underground. As soon as they land, Jesse immediately angrily recalls Wobbuffet into its Pokeball, and everyone proceeds to complain about how much pain they were in and just how bad the current situation was, when they suddenly direct their attention to a girl who was running by and question what the fuck she was doing, as she ran right past them, not even batting an eye. As she talked to herself, exclaiming that she was late, Jessie tried to get her attention by calling to her and starting the Team Rocket motto, and this does manage to get the girl's attention, and she becomes curious as to what they were doing down there, but she admits that she had no time to talk right now, as she was in a hurry. But before the girl can rush off again, Ash and the gang explain that they were seemingly lost, not knowing where the fuck they were, as one minute they were in a hole, and now they appear to be in some underground tunnel of some sort. At this, the girl instructs Ash and the gang and Team Rocket to follow her, admitting they would talk later, and Brock is the first one to oblige, as he was blushing at her, having a crush on her due to her being a girl, and he just liked any girl. Ash, Misty, and Team Rocket soon follow, and are led to another room that featured a colossal tower built with rings, with giant spears connecting them. As Ash and the gang began walking up and across the tower, about halfway across, Ash spotted some Pokemon sitting on some of the connecting spears, and instantly uses his Pokedex on them to find out that they were Xatu, the evolved form of Natu. Ash then tries to call out to the Xatu, wanting to get its attention, but it seems to either not hear him or ignore him, leading the girl to explain that the Xatu could tell the future, and were likely preoccupied while doing that, so that's why it was ignoring Ash. Upon hearing this, Misty tries to get the Xatu to tell her future, but the Xatu ignores her as well. Jessie then tries to get Xatu to tell her future, but the same thing happens. Meowth and James were lagging a bit behind, but when they arrived, they tried to get Xatu to tell their future as well, and surprise surprise, no avail. This leads the woman to introduce herself as Callista, and she explains about the Xatu further, explaining that they were often in a trance state because, in order to tell the future, they looked at the future and past at the same time, so it was very hard for them to concentrate on the moment. So that's why they were ignoring Jessie and Misty, as well as James and Meowth. Anyways, as Jessie thinks about what the Xatu could be thinking about, hoping that it was trying to determine her future, Meowth reminded Jessie that he could speak Pokemon, and was therefore talking to the Xatu, and claimed that Xatu had said that Jessie's future would not be a happy one. However, even Jessie knew that Meowth couldn't speak telepathically to Pokemon, so she proceeded to beat him up for his bad behavior, and his little trolling he was doing. Callista then clarified that she was a meteorologist, and utilized the Xatu for this purpose, explaining that she would tell some people in the area what the forecast was going to be thanks to Xatu's predictions, adding that all the people really believed in Xatu's fortune-telling abilities because her weather predictions always seemed to be right. Ash and the gang were about to inquire on how she did this and where all these people she was talking about were, but unbeknownst to them, they were actually about to physically see all of this go down in person, as Callista then called out to a Xatu, causing the Xatu to follow her as she runs toward another room. Ash and the gang follow Callista and the Xatu to this room as well, and they're amazed when they look around the room to see that it was a giant stone auditorium with a group of people sitting on bleachers, so there was people here after all. In the center of the room was a podium surrounded by two guardrails, and Callista runs up to the podium while two Xatu run up to the guardrails and perch on them. Callista then grabs out two fans, and all of the audience in the stands grabs them as well. The Xatu then join in, as they do similar patterns of movement as the fans with their wings. As Team Rocket catch up, entering the auditorium, they tiredly ask Meowth to translate what the Xatu were doing. But Meowth bitterly clarifies that he can only speak human and Pokemon. He couldn't interpret their actions, and jokes that he couldn't speak fan language. Meowth didn't need to translate though, as Callista confirmed what she was doing. She was using the Xatu to predict the coming weather, and declared that since the Xatu had followed along to their flag movements, it was going to be a sunny day with no clouds. Or rain or thunder for that matter, adding that the rain was only supposed to come tomorrow. Just then though, it seemed as though her prediction was proved wrong immediately, as it then started raining, as clouds had gathered seemingly out of nowhere. Callista was obviously confused by this, as she claimed that the Xatu were right all the goddamn time. She then remarked with fear that the Xatu being wrong must have meant that the fateful day was here, and warns her two Xatu to follow her as she goes running out of the auditorium and back into the tower that was connected by spears. But not before telling everyone in the audience that she would come back eventually and just had to figure out what was up with her Xatu. As Callista enters the tower, two more Xatu come down from the spears and join her other two Xatu, and Ash and the gang follow her into the tower, joining up with her as well. Meanwhile, back in the auditorium, Team Rocket were too tired from all the running to catch up to Callista and Ash and the gang, so they were left behind in the auditorium as a result, with the bitchy audience, who was bitchy because Callista had left, so they had no one to entertain them by commanding them to do flag movements and shit. They ordered Team Rocket to do some flag movements with them, but Jessie clarified that she had no fortune-telling abilities, so she would instead find another way to keep the crowd entertained, and eventually settled on rock, paper, scissors, hoping to use rock, paper, scissors as a distraction, and sure enough, she's able to, as she confuses the audience, as she simply orders them to play paper and look away while she picked her counter. The audience were obviously confused by this, since this meant that Jessie could just win immediately, and sure enough, Jessie just picked scissors, winning the rock, paper, scissors match, and this made the audience members all begin ranting to each other about how big a cheater Jessie was, leading Jessie to take the opportunity to escape with James and Meowth, running back into the tower with Ash and the gang. Meanwhile, back with Ash and the gang and Callista and the Xatu, Callista had led them all to an underground level of the tower, which also functioned as a weather station. Everyone then watches as Callista sends out a weather radar balloon resembling Xatu to check the current weather patterns, explaining that she used this as a last resort if the Xatu couldn't predict the future, since it should have been guaranteed to work, being an actual physical radar. However, much to Callista's shock, when the radar returns from its trip to the podium being observed by the audience, it reports that, just as the Xatu had predicted, it should be sunny with high air pressure, meaning that even it couldn't predict the rain for some reason, making Callista think that there was obviously something suspicious about this storm. Meanwhile, as for Team Rocket, they were making their way down the tower, hearing Ash and the gang and Callista's voices coming from the weather station. However, when they were walking down the stairs, Wobbuffet forcibly popped out of its Pokeball again, causing them to fall down the stairs and land straight onto Ash and the gang, knocking them down. After Jessie gets up and angrily recalls Wobbuffet, Team Rocket are immediately impressed by all of the technology down in the weather station and point to the Xatu balloon and question what it was, leading Callista to clarify that it was the radar system. Callista then explained that she called all her Xatu by numbered nicknames. Essentially, they were called Xatu 1, Xatu 2, Xatu 3, and Xatu 4. Just then, Xatu 3 starts moving its wings, and Callista views this as a prediction of the future, stating that a human with the ability to predict the weather would appear today. Brock questions if it was really a person that the Xatu was predicting, or rather a Pokemon, since he had heard that some Pokemon may have had weather predicting abilities, but Callista assures Brock that Xatu was referring to an actual person. Ash, Misty, Brock, and James were weirded out by this, since they all reported that they obviously couldn't predict the weather, and questioned if Callista had maybe gotten Xatu's prediction wrong, although Callista clarifies that she couldn't be at fault, because she was a 13th generation Xatu prophet, and therefore she had had plenty of training from the previous generations. And she states that if anyone was at fault for the prediction potentially being wrong, it was the Xatu itself, because it was getting old, and therefore could have been starting to fail predictions. As Callista begins to panic, Jessie gets mad at her for seemingly forgetting her, as she clarifies that although Ash and the gang and James couldn't predict the weather, she used to be able to, as she used to be a weather forecaster, formerly working for a news program. Callista questions why she was formerly a weather forecaster, leading Jessie to admit that she got a lot of her forecasts wrong. The Xatu that made the prediction wanted to see if this was true, to see if it was truly losing the ability to predict, so it began sweating as it looked into Jessie's past, with Jessie ordering it to stop, not wanting to be humiliated by her wrong guesses as a weather forecaster, as she tried to gas herself up, explaining that although she sometimes got predictions wrong, she got most of them right. This clearly wasn't the case though, as the Xatu became so overwhelmed by how bad Jessie's predictions were that it fainted, in fear that it seemingly had lost the ability to predict properly, since Jessie could not predict the weather, no way in hell. Jessie simply continued to brag about how good of a weather forecaster she was, glad that the Xatu had fainted. Callista knows that Xatu must have seen something disastrous about Jessie, which caused it to faint. However, she decided to take the chance and order Jessie to help interpret the radar data to see if there was maybe something that she missed. This forces Jessie to reluctantly admit that the Xatu had fainted after seeing her bad predictions, clarifying that she got every single one of her predictions wrong. Just then, all of the Xatu, including the fainted one, get up and immediately move their wings rapidly. Callista is horrified by this, as she interprets the rapid movements as the Zatu predicting that, just as Callista had feared earlier, the day was coming. Specifically, tomorrow. Ash and the gang and Team Rocket questioned what the fuck this ominous day was, leading Callista to explain that a while ago, all the Zatu had predicted that a rain would arrive that would pour for days, bringing a massive flood. And now, the Zatu had predicted that that great flood was about to arrive. Jessie then reminded Callista, though, that the radar stated that there was only a 1% chance of rain, because apparently she was able to look at the radar and determine a little bit. Callista obviously doubted this, but she also now doubted her Zatu, as she questioned if the Zatu really were getting old and couldn't accurately predict shit. This led her to begin panicking, as she claimed that if the flood arrived, then her job as a meteorologist with the Zatu would die as well. Explaining that if the Zatu's prediction of a great flood ended up being wrong, all of the people believing that rain was supposed to come due to the Zatu would immediately revoke their trust in the Zatu, which would in turn ruin her job with them. Ash and the gang told Callista to calm down, reminding her that if the actual Zatu's prediction failed, then she could just use the radar, and since it was designed like a Natu, she could use the radar to fool all of the people into thinking that it was a real Zatu, so they would still believe in the Zatu's predictions. However, Callista reminded Ash and the gang that the radar had predicted nothing but sun today, just as the Zatu had initially predicted, so explained that either the Zatu were wrong with their current prediction of the flood, or the radar was wrong with its current prediction of the sunny day, and explained that either of them being wrong could be disastrous for her. Adding that since the radar and the Zatu had different predictions, she would have to go with one and risk picking the wrong prediction, therefore ruining the audience's faith in Zatu. Jessie suggests that Callista try using the Zatu to predict Callista's future so she could see which of the Zatu she should pick, the fake radar one or the real one. Callista refused to do this though, explaining that she didn't like to predict actual people's future because she felt that that would take the fun out of life, since you wouldn't have any mystery in it whatsoever and you would know everything already, so you wouldn't be able to go for any of your hopes, goals, or anything like that because you would already know if you would achieve them or not. Upon hearing Callista's wise words, Jessie claimed that she was just testing Callista to make sure she said something like that, explaining that she had given up on trying to read her future a long time ago after all the failures with crystal balls and tarot cards and all that shit. Although Jessie really did believe that all that shit could tell the future, she just didn't want to look like a dumbass in front of Callista. Callista then realized that whether she liked it or not, she would just have to make a decision and hope that she made the right one, and she eventually decided to put her trust in her Zatu, explaining that the Zatu had originally made the prediction of a great flood back when they were a lot younger, and their predictions were a lot more accurate, so she figured that this great flood would be more accurate as well. With that, the Zatu agreed to help Callista, as she then ran back up to the auditorium with her Zatu, and got the idea to have her Zatu do an entirely new wing flap dance, and claimed that because of this, the Zatu had now made a new prediction, which was that the flood was coming. So, all of the Zatu lined up, and Callista began doing movements with her fans again, as the Zatu repeated them with their wings, and went faster with each pattern. And eventually, Callista revealed to all of the audience that the flood was coming, and ordered them to evacuate the area to safety, knowing that the flood could be very disastrous. The audience members eagerly oblige, wanting to get to safety, but before they go, they all leave behind their valuable objects as thanks for Callista's prediction. Since that was essentially how Callista made money from her job, was she would predict shit, and then the people would give valuables as thanks. Anyways, as everyone evacuated to safety, Callista waited on the podium, hoping that the flood would arrive so that her prediction would be correct. As for Team Rocket, they were amazed by all these valuable items, and were planning to steal them, and they only decided to steal them fully once they saw none other than Delibird arrive, wanting to collect this month's loan, giving the bill to Jessie and James, reminding them of all the shit they still had to pay off. So with that, that's what motivated them to go and steal all the valuable items. However, before they could steal the items to pay off their loan, Ash caught them in the act, despite their sneaky movements. Ash scolds them for going back to being evil at a time like this, but Team Rocket retorted that paying off their debt was way more important to them than this storm. Team Rocket then go to stop Ash and the gang, and remember their plan of utilizing the Delibird to help them, and they then threaten the Delibird, explaining that they wouldn't give their monthly payment unless the Delibird helped them defeat Ash and the gang. So the Delibird agrees to help, wanting to collect the money. So Jessie orders it to make the first attack by using Present, which Delibird does, throwing explosive presents everywhere. However, when the presents end up hitting the Zatu, it was revealed that these ones were healing presents, so the Zatu are completely unaffected by any of the explosions, and begin to fly away to dodge all the presents as Delibird continues to throw them. This leads James to send out his Weezing and have it use Smokescreen to blind the Zatu so that they couldn't see where to dodge the presents. Callista and Ash and the gang get enveloped by the smoke as well, so they proceed to try and run out of the smoke, and soon enough, the smoke disappears, with Team Rocket having expected the presents to have decimated the blinded Zatu. However, much to their surprise, the Zatu were completely unaffected by any of the presents, and were simply just standing still. Callista smiles, as she knew how this was possible. The Zatu must have been able to accurately predict where the presents were going to land, and they were able to dodge them as a result, even though they couldn't see anything. Delibird tries to throw some more presents at the Zatu, but they manage to dodge basically all of them, with the exception of 3, which just end up healing them again anyways. Knowing that it couldn't win, Delibird decided to give up, abandoning Team Rocket as it flew away, although it dropped a present as it flew away, which landed on Team Rocket and exploded, sending Team Rocket blasting off in the same direction as the Delibird, making them land together. With Team Rocket gone, the Zatu then began doing yet another wing pattern, and Callista interprets this as the Zatu saying that they were initially wrong about when the Great Flood would arrive. It wasn't going to arrive tomorrow, but today. This made Callista somewhat skeptical of them again, but she decided to retain her faith in them. And sure enough, the rain began to pour down at an immensely hard rate, seemingly confirming the Zatu's prediction. The Zatu then make one final prediction by flapping their wings again, which Callista translates as the Zatu predicting that Ash and the gang would be totally fine if they managed to leave the area immediately. Ash and the gang begin to doubt the Zatu, as the rain was coming down pretty hard, and they thought that even they wouldn't be able to fully escape the flood, even if they ran away now. The Zatu clarified, though, that they knew that their predictions were right, and added that their predictions were right 100% of the time, stating that all of their wrong predictions were just stuff that they had said to Callista to essentially lie to her on purpose, so that she wouldn't take advantage of their ability to see the future, explaining their belief that their power to see the future should only be used every once in a while, and for guidance. So essentially, they believed that their power to see the future was special, and shouldn't be overused by the humans. And clarified that it would be very dangerous for the humans to solely rely on them, because even though all their predictions had been 100% accurate so far, they could very well end up getting something wrong. And humans should make decisions for themselves. Ash and the gang agreed with this, as did Callista, as she promised not to use the Zatu's future-telling abilities as absolute fact anymore, clarifying that she would only explain to the people what the Zatu had said, and advise them to make their own decisions based on the advice. Knowing that Ash and the gang now understood the danger of relying on predictions, they decided to teleport out of the auditorium as Callista said goodbye to them. Just then, Callista and Ash and the gang began to glow blue, indicating that they were being teleported by the Zatu as well, as Zatu's way of rewarding them for seeing the danger. Because of this, Zatu's prediction was proved right, as Ash and the gang and Callista were teleported to safety out of the auditorium, right as the auditorium flooded, thanks to the giant storm surge. As the flood then extended out of the auditorium and into the entire valley area and the entire village, Ash and the gang and Callista watched, having been teleported just out of the danger zone. With the area now being pretty destroyed, Callista decided that she was going to move to the city and at the same time become a meteorologist for a news program, as opposed to just helping out people in the valley. Explaining that her goal had always been to move away from relying on the Zatu for predictions, and she was actually hoping to understand the science of the weather by becoming an actual meteorologist. Meanwhile, later, Team Rocket had returned to the now not flooded but severely damaged auditorium to try and find any of the valuable items, hoping that they weren't all washed away, because they still needed to pay off their debt. They even began digging underneath the auditorium to see if any of the items were washed underneath. Delibird was still with Team Rocket, and they tried to get it to help them dig, but Meowth translated that Delibird said that it was here to collect their loans, not to help them out, and flew away, promising to come back tomorrow and taunting Jessie and James that they would never be able to find the valuables. Team Rocket panic at this, although James suggests that they should find some Zatu to get them to predict their future, and if they were able to find the valuables or not, so they could save their time. However, after a little bit more longer of digging, Jessie and James came to the conclusion themselves that they weren't going to find any of the valuables, so they simply decided to run away, hoping to escape Delibird so that it would never be able to find them again. The episode then ends with Callista somehow already becoming a meteorologist for a news company in the city, likely due to all of the villagers maybe giving her some encouragement or something, or like telling the employers like, yo, you should hire this chick. But I don't know, man. Just know that she did end up achieving her goal of becoming a meteorologist. Ash and the gang were completely unaware of this, though, as by this time they had already left the area and got back above ground to continue on their journey to Mahogany Town.